And the final one I like to throw in, because it really, I can't believe how much this has been a center of debate, but it really, really has. And it has to do with how you dress, or what's the proper way to express gender as a feminist. Okay, so the first wave was very much about the conventional feminine, right? You need to be a society lady, not too fashionable, very serious. You should be feminine but somber and serious, and too fashionable was suspect. I don't have the quote in front of me because the way the Zoom sets this up, but there was a point where Susan B. Anthony didn't want to elect this one woman who was running for president of a convention because she was wearing the latest styles, and that kind of frilly or superficial focus could not possibly mean she was smart enough or serious enough to take on the role of women's rights. So this was in the 1800s. We were judging women on what they wore in terms of if they could be a serious enough feminist or not. The clothing themselves were very physically restrictive at that time, right? So women wore corsets and hoop skirts. There's something called bloomers for a minute, but they kind of went out of style fast. But as you remember, because of racism, that the social pull towards sexual differentiation. So in order to be racially advanced, you kind of needed to be feminine. So you see, these are the society women. They're sober, they're serious, right? They're proper. Over here on the right, these are bloomers. And apparently like the whole world was going to end when women wore dresses that long, but with a little tiny bit of pants sticking out the bottom. It was so dramatically upsetting that the leaders of the movement stopped wearing them because they didn't want it to distract from the movement. Right, you have the march, and then you still see echoes of this when Hillary Clinton did her speech on, oh God, was it the anniversary of women's right to vote? She wore an outfit she wore a pantsuit that really sort of gave a call back to that time. Okay, so second wave was very much into androgyny. Okay, so the idea that androgyny was best, and they called androgyny as non-gendered, but in a way, it really was just more masculine. It was the idea that you should get rid of anything feminine. The idea that femininity is what created oppression. So if you don't want to be oppressed, then don't dress feminine. Right, here's Susan Faludi, who's a famous second wave feminist, said, "The feminine woman is forever static and childlike. She's like the ballerina in an old-fashioned music box. Her unchanging features, tiny and girlish, her voice tinkly, her body stuck on a pin, rotating in a spiral that will never grow." Okay, so she obviously hated girly girls. That was the whole thing. Don't be a little girly girl. Don't dress up. This is why you're oppressed. So the second wave really rejected all feminine things to show they're as good as men. So Susan Brownmiller, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the book about rape, said women should really give up outward expression of feminine difference in order to lessen the oppression of women, right? So it was the idea that women were different that gave men the right to oppress women. So if we became the same, then they wouldn't have that right. So the costume, to be a feminist, you needed to wear blue jeans, sensible shoes, and an unmasked face, and that your clothes should be practical, functional, and comfortable, right? So we've seen this picture before in various marches, but if you just look at the outfits, it's about practicality. Your hair should be natural. You don't wear makeup. And as we met so awesomely in the one presentation, Andrea Dworkin, she pretty much wore her uniform of overalls every day. She's very recognizable. That clothes are about function. They're not, and in no way should you show femininity. Well, that became a problem with the third wave, right? Because you have these little girls growing up with second wave mothers who want to play princess. And I've even seen this, right? So my friend is lesbian, and all of her social groups are lesbian, and her daughter wants to play with dolls, and none of them want to none of them play with dolls or are feminine that way. And so, of course, I'm the one who buys her dolls. And the fact that I'm the biggest femme in her life is kind of sad, but because I'm not particularly feminine myself. But like, no matter how much you withhold something from a child, they're just going to want it more. You got to let them have their Disney princess phase, you know? So girly feminism is the idea that, wait a minute, is it more like, isn't it just reasserting misogyny to say feminine things are bad, right? To say that, oh yeah, we're not little princesses, we're actually tough people, but couldn't we be princesses and tough, right? So the idea is, could we be both and? Do women have to give up being women in order to be powerful? Do women have to become men to be powerful, or can we celebrate femininity as well? So here's some of the early third wave feminists are saying things like, hey, I like pink, I like boys, I get excited over lipstick names, I'm still a feminist. Do I have to give up everything that is feminine in order to do this? And again, the argument, we shouldn't have to be a man to be empowered, right? So in the 80s, there's this big, the shoulder pads and the androgynous look of trying to look masculine, trying to look like a man. In fact, all the men looked exactly like that too. I could throw a picture of David Bowie right there and you would never know the difference. But the idea that the third wave came up with is, hey, devaluing the feminine is patriarchal. We should be valuing the feminine. What the problem is that masculine is here and feminine is here. It doesn't mean get rid of feminine. It means put them more equal. Masculine and feminine, we need both. Both are valuable qualities. Both are valuable traits in our society. We need nurturers and we need innovators, right? We need both. Right, so Zoe Deschanel is famous for saying she was in New Girl. I'm pretty sure you know. She's very kind of girly, but she says it's not about women acting like men, it's about women acting like women and being successful, right? And Beyonce very much is someone who is feminine and powerful at the same time, and celebrates her power as a woman, as a mother, as a site of power and not as a site of oppression. So to summarize, the second wave felt like femmes are passive and controlled by patriarchy. And the third wave says, no, we're not cultural dupes. We know what we're talking about. So look, you can be feminine and a feminist. And a quote from the Feminist Manifesto, it's a book if you want to read it. Our desires are not simply booby traps set by the patriarchy. We know how to make girl stuff work for us. Our Barbies had jobs and sex lives and friends. Meaning you still play with Barbies and it's not just oppression. It's both and we'll talk about this in next week, but the idea that gender is performance. So this is my friend's daughter, and my friend asked her for Halloween if she wanted to be a doctor or a princess. A fairy princess. And she's like, what? I don't understand. Why can't I be a doctor and a fairy princess? So she already has that going in her head, which is, I am a doctor, fairy princess, obviously. Who says you have to choose? Why can't we be both? It's very self-aware. There's a sense of irony to it, right? So the geisha, who is normally considered like the most oppressed woman in this, she's a comfort woman. The idea is like, look, they know what they're doing. This is a performance. This isn't who she is. She's choosing to do this and things like that. So in summary, second wave feminists said, we feminists fought 30 years so women like you wouldn't have to squeeze your feet into shoes like that. And the third wave response is, I thought feminists like you fought all these years so younger women like me could wear whatever shoes we liked. So that's the summary of the waves. I hope that catches us up to where we need to be.